3 Minute Comic Book feels like a hybrid episode, in that it is such a Season 2 episode in terms of its sensibilities and pacing, like it is a ridiculously Season 2 episode still. But it also feels like a proto-Season 3 episode, bouncing around from scene to scene, getting more pop culture oriented, and being slightly more aggressive with its parodies. You look at this one next to something like Mr. Plow and can start seeing how the Frosted Chocolate Milkshakes show developed into what we all know and love today. Like, think about how it handles the pop culture aspect of the story. They go straight for the opening set piece, the comic convention. This sort of setting is very, very, very typical for the show to do these days. The Simpsons love them some opening set pieces. 3 Minute Comic Book flows exceptionally well, though, in how this set piece relates to everything that comes after it. It doesn't just strictly adhere to Bart living in the world of comics now, it simply introduces an element like Comic Book Guy, the Radioactive Man comic, and gives Bart a goal to work toward. They get all their pop culture references and parodies and silly one-off jokes like Otto, while still managing to stay firmly on topic. There's an argument that something like the Candy Convention in Homer Badman is better, just being a fun set piece that sets up the Gummy Venus de Milo thing. Homer Badman doesn't necessarily have to be an episode about candy, I guess. But it's cool how this early example sticks with what it started. It's much cleaner. Every scene flows organically into the next one. It's pretty neat, given how popular this stuff today is, to see what a convention looked like in 1991. Still kind of the same, just somehow antiquated. Season 2 of The Simpsons loved to champion the dumpy side of Springfield, keeping the scale and actual stakes really, really low. Mayor Quimby literally says they're dumping something like $300 into the local economy. The amazingly cool comic book that Bart wants costs a mere $100. It's $100 in 1991 dollars, but still, we're not talking about the boys fighting over a $100,000 comic. The early seasons are captivating in how humble they are, how relatable Springfield is with its mundane problems. It's something the show really got away from in the much later seasons, somewhat to its detriment. 3 Minute Comic Book is notable for being an episode of many firsts, introducing both Comic Book Guy and the world of Radioactive Man. I love how they show the old Laramie Cigarettes clip of the old show, and then bring in the completely uninterested Fall Out Boy actor. They write Comic Book Guy exceptionally well, especially considering it's his first appearance. He feels very much like the comic book guy that we all know later. The only difference, he's a little more upfront with how frustrated he is with the kids, literally decrying freaking kids to their faces. The writers eventually settled on a more sarcastic edge instead. It's somewhat weird though how he suddenly gives that villainous laugh, but it does flow with his general frustration toward his indecisive customers, so I get it. I forgot to mention, this is also the first appearance of Bartman. It's weird, I always seem to remember Bartman being this big giant thing around this time, but he really wasn't, huh? Maybe I just played too much of Bart vs. the World. Then we get the excellent Wonder Years parody right before Act 2. This is what I meant when I said that this one gets a little more aggressive with its parodies. You look at the other Season 2 episodes like, let's say, Lisa's Substitute, that slips in that Graduate parody right into the middle of the plot. Whereas this one is very in-your-face about it, it's very meta, bringing in Daniel Stern himself to narrate to the audience. It's an amazingly executed moment, just absolutely nailing that questioning and romanticized style of the Wonder Years writing. But this is still The Simpsons, and they can't play this too straight. I love how Homer gets fed up with this and keeps interrupting Bart. They really fell in love with this character stares off into nothing meta joke later on. Honestly, this joke and all of Act 2 basically feels like a Season 3 episode. A lot of punchy little vignettes about Bart trying to make money, and all these moments generally work. Love the sarcastic guy and his let the good times roll. And then pathetic Bart with his lemonade stand, then selling Homer's beer. Then we get the Mrs. Glick stuff, complete with a Gone with the Wind parody, and a filthy, but genuinely arousing soap opera. Cloris Leachman is absolutely fantastic in her role as Mrs. Glick. Just perfect. No one ever talks about this performance, but they really should. She delivers this out-of-touch and oblivious elderly character perfectly. She's fun because Bart doesn't really know how to deal with her. Mrs. Glick is just gonna do whatever she wants. She doesn't really notice or care how uninterested Bart is. I've actually done a few odd jobs for some elderly folks. These jokes are very true to that experience. Mrs. Glick isn't a terrible or mean-spirited person or anything. They don't write her particularly senile. She's just out of touch and very stuck in her ways. And the episode is excellent at getting the humor out of this situation. You can also tell this is a season 2 episode because they actually give Martin something to do. You notice that Bart is with Nelson when he first sees the comic. I would imagine if they did this episode today, it would be Bart, Milhouse, and Nelson in that treehouse. Oh, speaking of which, we have a official Simpsons Histories retraction. This, not the auto show, is actually the episode with the first real ha-ha, as we all know it today. The high-pitched one with the 2 ha's. Nelson delivers one on his bike toward Bart's lemonade stand. See, just another reason why this episode is so underrated and underappreciated. Turning the ending into a parody of The Treasure of Sierra Madre is very clever and fits the 3 characters well. Some nice banter here between the 3 of them. I really like the overly detailed discussions of tiebreakers they come up with on the spot. Bart descends into madness extremely quickly, which is arguably a little too convenient for the plot. I don't mind this too much because 1, we're quickly running out of time, 2, we need to generate conflict, and 3, it's somewhat understandable given how hard he worked for it. Bart had to take the iodine, he's gone through a lot. I forgot how much they just go at each other immediately, shoving one another and even grabbing each other at the throat. It's the first appearance of that brassy fight music, too. I guess it's nice not having Nelson around so that Bart can be the dominant force here. Anyone who's watched a season of Survivor could probably predict that Martin is going to be the first one voted out of this trio. Although it's funny that Milhouse immediately goes for, "Let's tie him up." Nice visual touch giving Martin the sort of dorky pajamas. In addition, they're successful in taking advantage of the shrill and ranting and crying Milhouse that we all enjoy so much. Is this the first appearance of the terrified and downtrodden version of him? I wonder. Ranty Milhouse is the best Milhouse. It's cool how they interrupt all this stuff with the little Marge and Homer moments. The first one is effective at resetting the action and letting the suspense rebuild again. The second one is a nice joke, poking fun at Homer and building the stakes of the situation. This is yet another first for the episode, the first appearance of the mysterious rumpus room, located next to the kitchen and behind the garage. Although, what's up with that inflatable, crusty punching bag thing? They must not use this room very much because of that ridiculously tiny TV. I'm a big fan of how over the top they are with destroying the comic book, just to stick that dagger into the situation. I'm less of a fan of Bart just outright stating the moral that they lost because they can't share. They lampshade this with Milhouse's "What's your point?" but they don't go anywhere particularly interesting with it. If you're going to point out the cliche, do something with it. I like the example in the Season 2 finale Blood Feud much better, how they repeatedly attempt to find a moral, and yet none of them actually fit the narrative. That's a pretty minor squabble though for this episode. As a whole, the ending is quite beautiful. Some really nice color design here, with those blue shadows to denote the early morning. The slow reveal of the final Radioactive Man panel is quite charming as well. The sort of last-second feel-good moment that early Simpsons was masterful at pulling off. Always puts a smile on my face. 3 Men in a Comic Book is a hidden treasure for The Simpsons. I'm not entirely sure why it doesn't get more attention. Maybe it's just because it's in Season 2 and people always kind of call that its own thing. Maybe it's because no one wants to deal with those annoying spinning heads on the DVD. Maybe it's because it's so close to the critically acclaimed Lisa's Substitute. I would say that episode is the better one of the two, but they accomplish such different things, they're little apples and oranges. In my opinion, 3 Men in a Comic Book is the second or maybe third best episode in the season. In some ways, it's this episode, not Lisa's Substitute, that laid more of the groundwork for where the show actually went in seasons 3 and 4. The opening set piece, the evolving plots in Acts 2 and 3, the in-your-face meta-jokes and parodies, the quick flashbacks, the pop culture elements, the rumpus room. Okay, maybe not the rumpus room. But it's one of the rare episodes that retains that seasons 1 and 2 reverence and that James L. Brooks magic, but still manages to feel breezy and topical with its jokes. I mean, why not have both? So next time you want to brave those spinning heads on the DVD, give this episode a watch. It's not just an excellent season 2 episode, it's a straight up excellent Simpsons episode. I just wouldn't spend $100 on it.